together, but you wonder how it is that you build friends and make friends in certain ways. We come together to the same events. We're working on the same cause. If there's an event like Hold Your Feet to the Fire, I'm here. They're here. Everybody's here. And then hearings in Congress, testimony that's taking place, any kind of a press conference or a rally, social events that are going on, receptions here and along the way. You look around and you see the people that believe like things, and it builds relationships and networks so that we're more effective.
So let's talk about a couple of themes that we've been hearing about while we're here. The first one being that Congress does not have the collective political will to talk seriously about immigration reform. Do you agree or disagree?
Oh, I agree. I agree. The fight's not there in Congress. In fact, we're concerned about being rolled from the open borders side. And even though there's a strong message here in this country, and with the anticipated nomination of Donald Trump, he made his campaign on immigration. And a lot of that, when I read his website, fits word for word for what I've been saying and writing for a long time. And I'm happy that that's the case. I hope he keeps it, and I hope he uses it. But the lack of will, this town is, when I first came here, I was a little bit more naive than I am today. And I believe that if I could I actually believe it when I went to the Iowa Senate, I had some of this washed out of me. But one would believe that a system would work this way, that people would come from each of the 435 congressional districts in America. They would bring the set of principles and convictions that reflect the values of the districts across the country. You could stand on principle and convince people that believe in principle that they'll come to your side. And the reality of it turns out to be, it's great to be right on principle. You must be, but to be able to convince others to follow you, instead, you need to find a political reason for them to come around on your side, because they aren't always as principled as we would like.
Okay, so speaking of on the topic of terrorism, sir, big topics in the news as of late: guns, immigration, Islam. Which is the most important when dealing with terrorism in your view, and what is the House doing on any of those topics?
Well, I'd say first, the most important is immigration with regard to terrorism, because we're watching as the president is, I wouldn't say just willfully, in a calculating way, he's trying to pour as many people from the terrorist, I'll call them terrorist sponsoring and terrorist spawning countries in the world as he can get into the United States. They have set up a target or a goal to pour at least 10,000 in, processing them through a location in Amman, Jordan. So he's in there. They're in the business of it, have been in the business now for maybe 2 decades, of trying to shift the demographics in America through immigration to benefit themselves politically. They've long looked and thought that if they can get 3 people to come in here from the third world, 2 of them will be Democrats at least. So they're about recruiting future documented Democrats and bringing in undocumented Democrats, and they don't care what happens to this culture, society, or civilization. And another thing that they happen to do is they look at our values, our principled social and conservative values, and they think, well, we're going to break those values down. And it's just a strategic thing. I don't know that they have a plan for what's on the other side of it. They just want to break down our values.
It has a twofold effect, what you're talking about. Yes, they're bringing in future Democrats. But what they're doing is they're keeping those Democrats that are already here, the single mom living in the projects in the People's Republic of New York City, as I like to call it, from getting those jobs that then those illegal immigrants may be getting, and therefore keeping them dependent upon government and keeping them even more so entrenched in the Democratic Party. It has that twofold effect. The question I have, though, is you can have the best laws in the world, and we can have everything pass. But if you don't have the proper administration of those laws by the executive branch, it's all going to fail anyway. What level of confidence do you have that the executive branch, under either party, would be able to effectively enforce any of the reforms that you would want to get passed?
Well, yeah, first, if I could just have the enforcement of the laws we have, we'd go a long, long ways towards solving this problem. In fact, had we been doing so for the last 25 years or so, we would have the problem. We wouldn't have the problem we have today. I recall when the class elected in 2010 came in, 87 freshman Republicans, a cohesive conservative group. At the beginning, they haven't stayed quite together as much as we would all like. But I remember sitting at a press conference with some of them, self-appointed conservative leaders within that group, and they were pontificating. They'd been here maybe a half a year or so at the time. They were pontificating about how they thought they could write some laws that would be tight enough that Barack Obama would have to enforce them. And finally just lost my cool a little bit. Are you serious? Are you watching him? He's violating the Constitution. He's violating laws. He's violating the laws that he's signed. And you think that you can write something to get him to sign it that he's actually going to abide by? And the answer is no. They were naive at that time, and they're not so much now.
It's amazing. We think that law will dictate behavior when we talk about citizenry. It doesn't even dictate behavior when we talk about the executive, Russ. It's crazy.
And speaking of executives, from the outgoing, which we know what we got there, to the possible one of two incomings, how's that looking for the House working with either President Trump or President Clinton on any of these issues going forward?
Well,
I'm guessing it's going to be like, do you want to be poisoned or shot, right? Is that what you're thinking about?
Well, maybe I should deal with Hillary first and get that handled. We know what she will do. She will do an accelerated version on immigration of what Barack Obama has done, and she said so. I mean, she would like to push people straight into citizenship if she could. She would bring in more and more refugees from the terrorist part of the world. I've dealt with her face to face in multiple years when she was Secretary of State. We had to have those sit down discussions like we're sitting here. No press, no staff, eye to eye. And I would think that she would accelerate that. And her respect for the Constitution is, I wouldn't say it's non-existent. I would say she's read it, she understands it, but she'd be looking for ways, and essentially said so, to circumvent it. When you get so it would be a horrible circumstance. The nominations to the Supreme Court and to the federal bench out of Hillary Clinton, that's one thing she would run the table on. From their perspective, she'd get everything right, and from our perspective, she'd get everything wrong. And the Constitution itself, within a few years, would be unrecognizable in its function. It would become an artifact of history that was irrelevant any longer, with the exception of the judges on the court would hold it up and say, I can interpret this, but you can't read it and understand it because you're not on the bench. That's how bad it would be with Hillary. With Donald Trump, he says he'll build a wall, and he'll build a beautiful wall, and he'll let the Mexicans pay for it. All right, let's go ahead with that one then. And what I'm seeing is this prosecutorial discretion that President Obama has exploited just obscenely, and we may get a decision on that yet this month. That's something that a wall does not have, is prosecutorial discretion. And so we build a good solid wall that will be 90-some% effective, and the better we man it and the better technology we put on it, the closer it gets to 100%. So even if we lose a few people that get over, under, around, or through, they'll be the best physical specimens, and we'll be able to identify them that way.
You know, I think when it comes to considering a Trump presidency, trust is built on keeping your word over and over and over again. I think, maybe I don't want to speak for you, Congressman, but I think you're waiting for that trust to initially begin before getting fully on board behind what a President Trump could do. Is that fair to say?
Well, there's been some inconsistencies, and there's no doubt about that. And what I'm trying to do is work with Trump's people and get to a place where I can have confidence that they'll be following through, that they'll have good, solid, principled, rule of law, conservative members, conservative people around Trump. If I believe we can work with the Trump administration, then I can step up and say, let's go for this. Right now, I say if the election's today, I'll vote for him.
Speaking of elections, money and people is what makes elections happen, right, Russ? And Congressman King's a friend of ours. We want to make sure he gets reelected, and he gets all the support possible through this show. Congressman, tell people how they can get in touch with you about all the great work that you're doing in Iowa and how they can support you, either through money, volunteering, what have you, and all the social media stuff.
Oh, great. Well, our campaign headquarters are at steveking.com, and it's real simple, just steveking.com. That's the website, and all the excess information is there. There is a donate button, and we can use it. As you can imagine, there are people on the left and some people on the center that would love to see me shot down and out. They ran a primary against me in June of this year, just this month, and we came out of that pretty well, 65 to 35. But it tells you that there's people that want to own a congressman, and they want to be able to tell him what he can do, what he shall do, and what he doesn't do. That effort has taken place in my district. So I've got an opponent that's coming at me and is using a lot of attack ads right now. So anyway, steveking.com will get that done, and we're a 24-month, 24/7 operation. My youngest son's the campaign chair. You call there, you're likely to get a hold of Jeff King, youngest son.
All right. And Russ, I think on behalf of you, I'm going to say, coming from the People's Republic of New York, you are our favorite Congressman King in Congress.
Yes, boy, not to be confused with the other Congressman King from Long Island.
Yeah,
this is an actual conservative
like you
here.
So much better. Congressman Steve King, thank you so much for coming on the show, pal. We're at halftime here behind Enemy Lines. Thanks for listening to the show. I'm Gene. The other guy you're hearing is Russ. And while we got you listening, check us out at www.behindemylines.radio.us. Check us out on the Facebooks and the Twitters at BEL_radio. And in case you missed any part of this live broadcast here on Spreaker, Tuesday nights at 10 p.m., you can check us out at any one of our rebroadcast outlets, including WJHC 107.5 FM on the Florida-Georgia line, K98 Talk, High Plains Talk Radio, Sackheads Media, and the Internet's conservative radio network, ICRN. But if you miss us on any one of those rebroadcast outlets, you can take Behind Enemy Lines Radio with you anytime on demand. You can check us out at iTunes, Spreaker, TuneIn, Stitcher, Podbay, Player FM, iHeartRadio, and you can also discover us on Google Play Music. Let's get back to the interviews right now. Here's the interview we did with Congressman Dave Brat. Well, listen, I've had the opportunity to speak to a lot of Congress members this week, and the theme that's been running through them, especially when it comes to the issue of immigration reform, is a lack of political will within Congress. Do you agree or disagree with that sentiment, at least?
No, that's right on the money. Need a spinal transplant and some courage up here. And the last two budgets we had, the Cromnibus and the Omnibus and whatever, that's must-pass stuff, right? That's where you can tell what our leadership wants to get done. So when they want to get the Export-Import Bank through for the crony buddies, boy, it shows up must-pass. Right, but when it comes to immigration, Brian Babin, my colleague's got a great bill on the refugee crisis, folks coming in from the terrorist hotspots, 7 countries. Instead of putting that in, which we all pushed very hard for, it's an 80% issue, right, with the people. Instead of putting that in, they rejected it, and instead they put in a 400% increase in H-2B visas, right, for the crony side again. So the American people are kind of getting sick of footing the bill for everything, Obamacare, da-da-da-da-da. Some of the big guys are getting off scot-free, and the middle class is catching on to the game up here pretty quick. And so they want to see some big change.
Let's focus on that legislation regarding Syrian refugees that you were talking about.
Yeah.
Where would the accountability be? Because you can pass a great law.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, because it comes from you, it's a very nicely tailored law.
Yeah.
But the application of it and the enforcement of it by the federal government, how can you have confidence in any legislation you're passing if you have an executive branch that's not going to be willing to enforce it the way it's meant to be written?
Well, you got it right. That's the fundamental issue, right? Loretta Lynch is overseeing this to sit-in the Democrats are doing right now, and it's been an issue since when Boehner was in a year and a half ago. I came in, right, for my first term.
Yeah, you might have made a little splash when you did that, by the way, especially with the leadership.
Right. So I won a few friends on that one. But the big issue, my first weekend, and I had to vote against the rule and da-da-da-da-da, but it was Obama's unconstitutional amnesty. And we've forgotten. Obama himself said 20 times on TV, it's unconstitutional. And then he does it. We said we're going to defund DHS, et cetera. We're going to fight tooth and nail. That was Boehner's quote, right? Tooth and nail. No tooth, no nail, no nothing, right? We just rolled. And now we're funding it fully, and no one even remembers, right, that it was an issue. And doesn't hold our own leadership. And so our own leadership has not fought hard for the issues, and there's been a vacuum. And then my own side wants to know where Donald Trump comes out of. Well, he comes out of that vacuum that we created by not having guts to fight Russia, China, right, et cetera, trade deals for the middle class, wages, immigration, everything.
Actions have consequences, and Donald Trump is the consequence of the inaction of many of the House leadership.
Right.
Let's talk about the sit-in that happened this week in Congress. For just your initial reaction to that, and then what exactly is the point at this time, if I can just steal something from Hillary Clinton? Everything that was meant to go through the legislative process failed. So now you're going to throw a hissy fit? Is that what this is?
Right. I mean, a lot of us on our own side would love to demand a bill out of our leadership on certain topics, right? I just mentioned immigration. Well, I don't have enough votes. We don't have enough horsepower yet until the American people demand it, and it's coming.
You must start a sit-in right now, Congressman.
Right. I know. Exactly. So that's coming. And so the left on this one, they're just completely confused, right? I mean, so the thesis was terrorist lists shouldn't be able to buy guns.
And due process be damned.
Yeah, and due process be damned. But even more fundamental, just go through it real slow, right? So you've identified a terrorist, and along this fair day today, right, why wouldn't that person be in jail? Why are you worried about the gun thing, right? So they're hyping it on the politics. If you got a terrorist and you know it, the FBI shouldn't be dropping them, right? This guy was dropped. He was on the list in 2014. and was free to buy a gun after because it wasn't on the list. He should have been in jail or deported, right? If he's here illegally.